Sisi for bringing us together at this pivotal moment. Thank you, Mr. President. Let me start by acknowledging that this day is a day of commemoration at home in the United States. It's Veterans Day. America's veterans and their families, survivors and caregivers, are the very spine and soul of the United States. And on this special day, on every day, I honor all of those who sacrificed for our nation like my son. I want to thank one proud American veteran, a lifelong public servant, a dear friend, and literally one of the most decorated men to fight, Special Envoy for Climate, John Kerry. John, your commitment, your passion, your diplomatic expertise have been absolutely critical to delivering incredible progress on climate issues over the past 2 years. And I thank you, pal. I thank you for being my friend. Here in Egypt, the Great Pyramids and the ancient artifacts stand as testament to millennia of human ingenuity. We see our mission to avert climate catastrophe and seize a new clean energy economy not only as an imperative for our present and future, but through the eyes of history. According to the World Meteorological Organization, the past 8 years have been the warmest on record. In the United States, we're seeing historic drought and wildfires in the West, devastating hurricanes and storms in the East. Here in Africa, home to many nations considered most vulnerable to climate change, food insecurity. Hunger follows 4 years of intense drought in the Horn of Africa. Meanwhile, the Niger River in West Africa, swollen because of more intense rainfall, is wreaking havoc on fishing and farming communities. In Nigeria, flooding has recently killed 600 people. 1.3 million more are displaced. Seasonal livestock migration routes have been used for hundreds of years, are being altered, increasing the risk of conflict between herders and local farming communities. The climate crisis is about human security, economic security, environmental security, national security, and the very life of the planet. So today, I'd like to share with you how the United States is meeting the climate crisis with urgency and with determination to ensure a cleaner, safer, and healthier planet for all of us. From my first days in office, my administration has led with a bold agenda to address the climate crisis and increase energy security at home and around the world. We immediately rejoined the Paris Agreement. We convened major climate summits and reestablished. I apologize we ever pulled out of the agreement. We established major economies forum to spur countries around the world to raise their climate ambitions. Last year at COP26 in Glasgow, the United States helped deliver critical commitments that will get 2/3 of the world's GDP on track to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Over the past 2 years, the United States has delivered unprecedented progress at home. Through a generational investment in upgrading our nation's infrastructure, we're making our power grid better able to transmit clean energy, expanding public transit and rail, building nationwide network of electric vehicle charging stations, over 50,000. And this summer, the United States Congress passed and I signed into law my proposal for the biggest, most important climate bill in the history of our country, the Inflation Reduction Act. It includes less than I asked for, but a significant amount, $368 billion, to support clean electricity, everything from onshore, offshore wind to distributed solar, zero emissions vehicles and sustainable aviation fuels, more efficient electrified buildings, cleaner industrial processes and manufacturing, climate-smart agriculture and forestry, and more. Look, our Department of Energy estimates that the new law will reduce emissions in the United States by about 1 billion tons in 2030, while unleashing a new era of clean energy-powered economic growth. Our investments in technology, from electric batteries to hydrogen, are going to spark a cycle of innovation that will reduce the cost and improve the performance of clean energy technology that will be available to nations worldwide, not just the United States. We're going to help make the transition to a low-carbon future more affordable for everyone, accelerate decarbonization beyond our borders. In fact, the International Energy Agency recently concluded that our significant climate investment will, quote, help turbocharge the emerging global clean energy economy. I was reading their quote, sorry. It's going to shift the paradigm for the United States and the entire world. We also ratified the Kigali Amendment to rally the world in phasing down the production and consumption of HFCs, greenhouse gases, that are thousands of times more damaging than carbon dioxide. And just yesterday, the United States became the first government to require that our major federal suppliers disclose their emissions and climate risk and set targets for themselves that are aligned with the Paris Agreement. As the world's largest customer, with more than $650 billion in spending last year, the United States government is putting our money where our mouth is to strengthen accountability for climate risk and resilience. These critical steps are already locking in vital investments in our infrastructure, delivering lower costs for clean energy, spurring good-paying union jobs for American workers, and advancing environmental justice in our communities. Folks, we're proving that good climate policy is good economic policy. It's a strong foundation for durable, resilient, inclusive economic growth. It's driving progress in the private sector. It's driving progress around the world. And the sum total of the actions my administration is taking puts the United States on track to achieve our Paris Agreement goal of reducing emissions 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by 2030. Let me just take a moment to emphasize how meaningful it is that I can say that. I introduced the first piece of climate legislation in the United States Senate way back in 1986, 36 years ago. My commitment to this issue has been unwavering. Today, finally, thanks to the actions we've taken, I can stand here as President of the United States of America and say with confidence, the United States of America will meet our emissions targets by 2030. We're racing forward to do our part to avert the climate hell that the UN Secretary General so passionately warned about earlier this week. We're not ignoring harbingers that are already here. It's true, so many disasters. Climate crisis is hitting hardest those countries and communities that have the fewest resources to respond and to recover. And that's why last year I committed to work with our Congress to quadruple U.S. support to climate finance and provide $11 billion annually by 2024, including $3 billion for adoption. That's why the Fund Emergency Plan for Adaptation and Resilience, PREPARE we call it, to help more than 500 million people in developing countries respond to climate change. We're already requested more than $2 billion for the PREPARE this year. I'm going to fight to see that this and our other climate objectives are fully funded. Today, as a down payment, we're announcing more than $150 million in initiatives that specifically support Prepare's adaptation efforts throughout Africa, including Adaptation in Africa, effort that Egypt and the United States launched together in June. This includes support for expanding early warning systems to help cover Africa, broadening access to climate finance, providing disaster risk protection, strengthening food security, mobilizing the private sector, and supporting new training center in Egypt to accelerate adaptation across the efforts all across the continent. My administration has also made the United States the first ever contributor to the Adaptation Fund last year, and this year we're doubling our pledge to bringing our total commitment to $100 million. We're also making sure that every dollar we deliver goes as far as possible, unlocking larger pools of finance and the trillions in private investment we know that will be needed. Folks, we're also supporting the Global Shield, a G7 initiative to better protect vulnerable countries everywhere from climate-related losses and quickly respond to climate-related damages. And the G7-led Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment is working to meet the critical infrastructure needs in low and middle-income countries with specific focus on climate. The project we're facilitating is built on transparency, partnership, the protections for workers and the environment. One of the many projects already underway is a partnership between American firms and the government of Angola to invest $2 billion building new solar projects in Angola. And everywhere, like everywhere in the world, climate adaptation in Africa is working toward energy transmissions that just means creating good jobs, spurring inclusive economic growth, and leaving no one behind as we implement the Sustainable Development Goals. Folks, now I know this has been a difficult few years. The interconnected challenges we face can feel all-consuming. And the upheaval we're seeing around the world, especially Russia's brutal attack against Ukraine, is exacerbating food shortages and energy spikes in cost, increasing volatility in those energy markets, driving up global inflation. Against this backdrop, it's more urgent than ever that we double down on our climate commitments. Russia's war only enhances the urgency of the need to transition the world off its dependence on fossil fuels. True energy security means that every nation is benefiting from clean, diversified energy future. No action can be taken without a nation understanding that it can use energy as a weapon and hold the global economy hostage. It must stop. And so this gathering must be the moment to recommit our future and our shared capacity to write a better story for the world. Let's build on our global climate progress, raising both our ambitions and the speed of our efforts. The science is devastatingly clear. We have to make vital progress by the end of this decade. And that's why the United States is rallying the world around climate game changers. I launched one such game changer last year in the European Commission President von der Leyen, the Global Methane Pledge. We started it with the EU and 8 other countries. In Glasgow, it grew to more than 100 countries. Now more than 130 countries have signed on to covering more than half of the global methane emissions. Methane is 80 times more potent than carbon, and it accounts for nearly half of the net warming we're experiencing now. So cutting methane by at least 30% by 2030 can be our best chance to keep within reach of 1.5 degrees Celsius target. Today, we're releasing an updated Methane Emissions Reduction Act plan, which lays out how the United States is meeting the pledge. We're investing more than $20 billion in domestic methane mitigation to do things like cap orphan wells, leaking methane, improving industrial equipment in the oil and gas sectors to reduce emissions. It also lays out strong regulatory actions, including a new proposal from our Environmental Protection Agency to strengthen standards on methane across sectors, especially from super emitters, to make sure it's not released into communities impacting on public health. All told, these steps will reduce U.S. methane emissions from covered sources by 87% below the levels of 2005 by 2030. Folks, another game changer is conserving our natural environment, whether it's the Congo Basin's forests and peatlands here in Africa, or the Amazon Basin in South America, or forest, wetlands, grasslands in the United States. Preserving nature is one of the most impactful climate solutions we have. Some that indigenous people communities have known and been the stewards of these efforts for a long time and generations. They've known it. Here at COP27, we are co-chairing Forest and Climate Partnership to deliver real rapid strides to halt deforestation. The best part is we don't have to develop any new technologies. We just have to make clear forests are more valuable when they're preserved than when they're destroyed. It's that basic. And those of our able should be chipping in to help those countries, in fact, preserve those great forests. We're bringing together partners across the public and private sector and philanthropic sectors to put the healthy ecosystem at the heart of healthy economies. This is it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us. We need to harness our capacity to tackle emissions in economic sectors like international shipping. If the shipping sector were a standalone economy, it would rank as the 10th largest emitter in the world. So together with Norway, the United States has launched the Green Shipping Challenge. During this COP, we've seen dozens of commitments from governments as well as ports and private companies to facilitate green shipping corridors and align the sector with the 1.5-degree goal. If we can accelerate actions on these game changers, we can reach our goal. We can keep it within reach as well. But to permanently bend the emissions curve, every nation needs to step up. At this gathering, we must renew and raise our climate ambitions. The United States is acting. Everyone has to act. It's a duty and responsibility of global leadership. Countries that are in a position to help should be supporting developing countries so they can make decisive climate decisions, facilitating their energy transitions, building a path to prosperity and compatible with our climate imperative. If countries can finance coal in developing countries, there's no reason why we can't finance clean energy in developing countries. I'm pleased to announce today, alongside the European Union and Germany, a $500 million package to finance and facilitate Egypt's transition to clean energy. This package will enable Egypt to deploy 10 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030, while bringing offline 5 gigawatts of inefficient gas-powered facilities, reducing emissions in Egypt and power sector by 10%. We'll also work with Egypt to capture nearly 14 billion cubic meters of natural gas, which Egypt currently flares, vents, or leaks from its oil and gas operations. And because of this cooperation, Egypt is elevating its climate ambition and submitting enhanced national determination contributions. If we're going to win this fight, every major emitter nation needs to align with the 1.5 degrees. We can no longer plead ignorance to the consequences of our actions or continue to repeat our mistakes. Everyone has to keep accelerating efforts throughout this decisive decade. My friends, I came to the presidency determined to make the transformational changes that are needed, that America needs to make, and we have to do for the rest of the world, to overcome decades of opposition and obstacles of progress in this issue alone, to reestablish the United States as a trustworthy, committed global leader on climate. As I stand here before you, we've taken enormous strides to achieve that. But I don't stand here alone. This progress is being driven by young people all across America. Like young people around the world, they feel the urgency of climate. They feel it deeply. They're committed to these issues. They know the stakes, and that's their world we're creating. This is not to stand by and allow us to fail in this responsibility. We can't. That's why as I look out of all the things that we've accomplished, but so much more to do, I'm optimistic. For all the work that remains to be done, we have to put down significant markers of progress. The United States has taken enduring steps to meet our goals. We're delivering on our promise of leadership, and more of the world is standing with us. Though determined diplomacy is necessary, we're finding consensus, building understanding, and launching new approaches. And the inspiring passion of young people, civil society, climate activists, indigenous communities is literally galvanizing the world. Yes, the challenges we face are great, but our capacity is greater than the challenges. We must never doubt that. So let's reach out and take the future in our hands and make the world we wish to see and that we know we need. A planet preserved for generations to come. An economy powered by clean, diversified, secure energy sources. Opportunities unlocked through innovation and cooperation to deliver equitable, more prosperous, more stable, and more just world for our children. That's why we're here. That is what we're working toward. And we can do it together, I am confident. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and may God bless you all.
So the US President Joe Biden addressing the COP27 climate summit in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, saying that the US will meet its emissions targets by 2030. He said the climate crisis is about human security and economic security. The US is meeting the climate crisis with urgency, he said, and apologised that the US withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, we've got some breaking news for you regarding a former security guard at the British Embassy in Berlin. He has pleaded guilty to 8 offences under the Official Secrets Act. David Smith was extradited from Germany earlier this year after being accused of collecting information from the British Embassy in Berlin with the intention of passing it to a foreign state. One of the charges related to allegations that he passed information to a person he believed was a representative of the Russian state, and he now faces a maximum sentence of 14 years in prison. The Irish Prime Minister, Micheál Martin, has hailed a window of opportunity to resolve concerns over the Northern Ireland Protocol. A dispute over the Brexit arrangement has left Northern Ireland without a functioning devolved government since February. The Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, shared Mr Martin's views, saying that talks are heading towards common ground.
The discussions that the Prime Minister had with all colleagues here about the importance of finding a safe landing zone, I think were conducted in a cordial and constructive fashion. And as the Northern Ireland Secretary said, he is a glass half full man, so we remain optimistic about the opportunities of reaching a resolution.
The essential point is that a window of opportunity has been created with the pausing of the elections and the engagement between the United Kingdom government and the European Union in respect of talks and a clear preference articulated both by the UK Prime Minister and the European Union leadership the preference for a negotiated resolution of this. It's my assessment that the window of opportunity now does exist. The space now exists to resolve the outstanding issues pertaining to the protocol by negotiation.
Albania's Prime Minister has told Sky News that he understands the frustration of UK politicians over what he describes as failed border policies. Idi Rama spoke to our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins. She's been in Albania meeting some of those who've attempted to travel to the UK.
14th of October 2022, and 44 migrants are crossing the Channel to England. The smugglers have packed them in tightly. Every extra person means more cash.
Atë kisha shumë frikë, po duke parë se s'kishte edhe shumë lek shpëtimi, nuk menduam më gjatë e morën përsipër atë risk. Nuk është se shumica normal kishim gjithë frikë.
Speaking in disguise, Goni told us he paid the smugglers €3,500, one of more than 12,000 Albanians who've illegally crossed to England in small boats this year. First, he travelled across Europe by car, then waited in France for the signal to go.
Kemi arrit, kur kemi kalu në ujërat angleze, kemi njoftu policinë angleze pastaj. Që jemi në rrezik, mund na ndihmoni, atëherë erdhen ato na ndihmuan, na morën, na nxorën bregën.
Goni was deported back to Albania a few days later, but his story is a common one. Videos of trips are easy to find on social media, as are smugglers' adverts for cut-price crossings. And they're tempting offers for many in the northeast of Albania. This is the most deprived corner of one of Europe's poorest countries. Wages are low, jobs are scarce, people want to escape.
From Albania, we go to Skopje.
With few prospects at home, Alex is among thousands who paid smugglers to take him to the UK, where he worked illegally for years.
If I have chance, we go right now to England. Not just to England, just to move from Albania. Here doesn't have no jobs, no nothing, you know. And you're gonna work like 10 hours for 10 pounds, basically. So it's no life here.
He isn't alone. Most Albanian migrants come from this area. This village of 2,000 people has dwindled to around 400. Some went to the city, but many escaped abroad. Albania is a small country with a big problem. The population here is around 2.8 million, yet the government says every single year since 2011, on average 42,000 people have left. And that's turning communities like these into ghost towns. In the nearby city of Kukës, it's a similar story. People tell us every family knows 2 to 3 relatives living in the UK, some legally, others not. So why, I ask, is it such a dream destination?
In UK is a good life. No kills, no drugs, no... This is what I'm thinking, personal thing.
David, not his real name, tells me he got to the UK by hiding in trucks in France. He worked for 5 years before being deported. Some people call you criminals. Are you criminals?
No. Absolutely no. I don't want to hear that. Who say that is a liar. Albanians is not criminals. Albanians is good people, good culture. We work hard. Absolutely, yeah.
But you'd break the law to go. You'd do a legal action to go to UK.
Yeah, legal. But everybody, we go illegal, I told you, for a good life.
The lack of hope here boosts the traffickers' trade. The UK government says it's working with Albania to stop the smugglers and speed up the removal of migrants without the right to be in the country. But the Albanian Prime Minister told me the Home Secretary's recent comments about an invasion are unhelpful. Do you feel like Albania needs an apology from the UK?
When you apologize, it's okay, it happens. When you don't, and when you avoid it, then it means that you want something from what you said. So it means that there is a calculation behind it. It means that you really are talking to a certain number of voters that want to hear this, and you are feeding them with this because you need their votes. But the consequences of that can be devastating for the people, for our people in Britain, and for Britain itself.
While tens of thousands of Albanians live legally in the UK, more and more are risking their lives at sea. Without renewed hope at home and better cooperation from abroad, they will keep on coming. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Albania.
Well, if you'd like to hear more on that story, you can scan the QR code that you can see on screen right now and listen to Siobhan in conversation with Neil Pattison in the latest edition of the Sky News Daily podcast. They're joined by a migration expert to discuss why Albanians are coming to the UK, and you can subscribe to the Daily for free wherever you get your podcasts from. Now, as we head towards the weekend, let's see how the weather's looking.
Anticipation is rising, and so is the atmosphere. Are you ready? The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the weather will settle down this weekend and it remains very mild for November. However, overnight fog will become more prevalent, especially across England. While most places will be dry this evening, outbreaks of rain will affect parts of Scotland, Ireland and northern England as earlier wet and windy weather eases and pushes southwards. Most places will be mild tonight as the rain edges back northwards across northern England, Ireland and southern Scotland, with northern Scotland clearer and colder. Some mist and fog patches will form in the cloud breaks over England and Wales. Thicker cloud and outbreaks of rain will clear northwards from Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland on Saturday.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Do stay with us here on Sky News. At 4 o'clock, civilians in the key Ukrainian city of Kherson celebrate after Russian forces retreat. Breaking news at 4 o'clock. A British man admits spying for Russia while working at the UK's embassy in Berlin. Also ahead. Ukrainians celebrate in the strategic city of Kherson as Russia says its forces have completed their withdrawal. Britain's economy shrinks in a sign that the country is entering what's forecast to be a long recession.
It's not going to be easy. There are going to be some very difficult choices. I've used the word eye-watering before, and that's the truth.
The US president tells the COP27 climate summit in Egypt the US